Welcome back to the seminar, ladies and gentlemen, on this afternoon session with the wonderful talk from Mr. Peter Meyer. So, in this session, we will continue with another slide. Okay, the rest of slide this morning, and then we'll go to another topics as mentioned this morning. At this moment, please join me in welcoming Mr. Peter Meyer.
Okay, so thank you very much. As mentioned, there is still one topic left concerning outlook in the field of tourism statistics, and this is one of the new projects also by UNWTO, starting as mentioned in the morning with the Manila conference last year, officially, let's say. It's concerning measuring sustainable tourism. What means sustainable means there are three topics which has to be differentiated. It's the economic sustainability, it's the environmental sustainability, and it's the social sustainability. And all three are quite important for the success of a tourism destination. In fact, we have some information, of course, available on the economic sustainability based on the regular, let's say, on the regular tourism statistics and on tourism satellite account. But tourism satellite accounting is focusing mainly on the economic impact. In the moment, we don't have too much information available about the social impact, but also about the impact on the environment. In the beginning here, in this slide, some very general issues are mentioned according to sustainability of tourism. Of course, attracting tourists depends very much on the quality of the nature of the landscapes to where the tourists are coming, and so high quality of the natural and the social environment is, I would say, one of the prerequisites for attracting tourists. And there is a growing need to recognize that there is not only an economic impact, but there is also a social impact, and there is also ecological impacts of tourism, as we know. So in many countries, in many regions, there are sustainable tourism policies available already, but there is still a lack of guidance, and there's still a lack of indicators available to measure, to monitor the sustainability apart from the economic impact measures. So the development of the indicators was initiated also last years ago. So it's not a very new phenomenon to measure these kind of things via indicators. I remember 20 years ago, at least in the European Union, there was a discussion starting concerning this kind of indicators. But now there is a, let's say, a worldwide process within or initiated by UNWTO, again, to focus more on the measurement of a comprehensive measurement of the sustainability, related to the sustainability of tourism. Well, as mentioned, there were some initiatives already in the past, very much in the past. There was this Brundtland report defining I think it was in 1987, more about the sustainability in general and about the sustainability in particular for tourism. There was already a guidebook, for example, in 2004, developed by UNWTO with UNEP. This is the agency, the environmental agency on the UN level. There was also a presentation by Eurostat, the Statistical Office of the European Union, concerning sustainable development, concerning the development of sustainable indicators. There's another project in the European Union, European Tourism Indicator System, which is providing some indicators. And I did also, in my presentation, I did also some links. So when you click on these links, and if this is available electronically, we will guide to these guidelines. Let's say in many countries, there are environmental policies already available, but the problem is to quantify and to measure or present separately these kind of indicators for the tourism industry. We know, for example, how much the waste, let's say the waste, the amount of waste in total, but it's not so easy to find out whether this is due to tourism or whether this is due to the resident population, for example. And also the tourism policy goals of the countries are different, and in particular when we're speaking about indicators and about the sustainability, we have to take into account regional and local aspects. So it's makes not too much sense to develop indicators on a national level, because you can imagine it's quite different if we speak about sustainability in coastline, or we speak about sustainability in the mountain areas, or we speak in big cities. So this is quite different from place to place. Here in this box, it's mentioned one of the prerequisites from my point of view is that a well-coordinated collaboration between tourism policy, between statistics, between governmental and non-governmental organizations in this respect would be quite useful. And quite useful in that respect that these indicators have to be interpreted. And I think in cooperation with this kind of institutions, I think this could be quite successful. Coming to the MST project by UNWTO, as you know, there is a so-called 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This was initiated by the UN. There is a UN resolution concerning this, and this was defined. There was defined in this way 17 targets or 17 SDGs, so Sustainable Development Goals, and nearly 170 targets. And every country in the world should provide indicators. We have, I think on the UN level, we have about 700 indicators measuring these around 170 targets. And three of these targets, or 3 SDGs, touching directly tourism. And therefore, this was the moment for UNWTO to initiate this project concerning measuring sustainable tourism. And the objective, which is mentioned here, the objective of this group, there was installed an expert group concerning MST. The objective is to develop a statistical framework on the measurement of sustainable tourism, like for TSA, like for the tourism statistics. So this is one of the objectives, and this is a quite, let's say, a challenging and quite comprehensive objective. The other objective is to implement this statistical framework in the countries. So there will be some capacity building concerning this framework in the near future in different countries, and of course this group is also concerned, or this work is also concerned with the implementation of the SDG indicators, which have a direct link to tourism. having said this, the statistical framework should include, so the development is focusing on the statistical framework on measuring sustainable tourism, and this statistical framework should focus on indicators and measures and methods which goes beyond DSA, which goes beyond the measurement of the economic impact of tourism. And therefore, this statistical framework and development of the statistical framework needs a lot of parties, let's say, a lot of persons, a lot of institutions being included. Some are mentioned here. For example, of course, tourism statistics is a very important area. Environmental economic accounting is a very important issue. So maybe you are aware of the fact that, and I mentioned it in the morning, we have satellite accounts not only for tourism, health and so on, we have also for environment, for example. And the environmental accounting is based again on an international standard. It's the international standard for economic and environmental accounting, CEA, so some methodological concepts on this side are already available. Of course, what is necessary as national account is very important. Tourism satellite accounting, transport and mobility data is important. Regional statistics is quite important because, as I mentioned, measuring sustainability makes only sense if it's measured on a regional level, not on a national level, but measured on a regional level. And this is, by the way, this is one of the challenges we are facing in this project because of the data availability. On regional level, sometimes there are much less data available than on the national level. Coming to the SDG indicators with direct link to tourism, in fact, we have 3 indicators, and one of these indicator is 8.9.1 and 8.9.2. The first one is concerning the GDP share of tourism, so it's the economic, let's say the economic impact, and then we have another one measuring this economic impact, it's concerning employment. On the other side, there is another indicator proposed, and it's concerning the number of sustainable tourism strategies or policies and implemented action plans with a grid monitoring and evaluation tool. So this is another indicator. So we have in fact 3 indicators for which UNWTO is responsible for. This is called, UNWTO is, for these 3 indicators, a so-called custodian agency, which means UNWTO is responsible for collecting these indicators and submitting and transmitting the data to the UN Statistical Division. Of course, we are still facing problems with these indicators, and we were presenting our concerns and our new ideas to the so-called interagency expert group on SDGs. This is an expert group only dealing with these indicators, and we have some concerns in particular about the last 2 indicators, 8.9.2 and 12B1, because here it's mentioned the number of jobs in sustainable industries, and in fact we don't know, and we have no definition what is a sustainable industry. In fact, I mean, you can do some assumptions, but there is no definition for this. This is the one challenge and problem we are facing with this, and the second one is concerning the number of sustainable tourism strategies. And the problem again is here: what is a sustainable tourism strategy? Of course, in the most tourism strategies in the world, I would say some sustainable aspect is included, but still, what is a real sustainable strategy? What is not a sustainable strategy? So we have also some concerns about these indicators. This was our concerns were presented some weeks ago. There was a meeting in Vienna of this international agency expert group, and we presented our concerns, and they will hopefully deal in the near future about our new ideas and about our concerns. But of course, this is only a very small part for this group because they are dealing with, as I said, with about 800 indicators of different areas. Yes, and one of the projects of UNWTO is also to develop indicators which goes beyond these already mentioned SDG indicators with direct link to tourism. And in the last committee meeting in February of this year, there was the idea to install a so-called subgroup on SDGs, and within this subgroup of SDGs, we are dealing with, of course, with these indicators for which UNWTO is responsible for. So these are these three mentioned indicators, and this group is also developing indicators which goes beyond these three indicators with direct link to tourism. So this is the task of this group. We will present our results in the next expert group meeting of measuring sustainable tourism, which will be held in October of this year. And anyway, you will receive an invitation of UNWTO to take part in this project. So these are, in the moment, these new developments in the field of tourism, in tourism statistics in general, which goes a little bit beyond what was measured until now. I mean, tourism flows, arrivals, international arrivals, overnight stays, physical indicators. We have the monetary indicators, tourism satellite accounting, and now, in addition, there is the real initiative to measure or to have indicators which goes beyond these indicators. Of course, I'm sure there are a lot of discussions concerning these indicators, in particular on the policy side. I remember we had discussion also with my ministry related to these issues concerning indicators, and they have sometimes a different view, of course, from the policy side to this kind of developments and to this kind of indicators. Well, concluding here is that I think that's quite clear that tourism has an impact on these three aspects: economic, ecological, and social. By the way, social impact was or still is a big topic, I would say, in different destinations, and it's called over-tourism. So that's the local people, well, they have a lot of advantages, as we know, but they have also disadvantages. And this is occurring also in my country. In some places there are a lot of tourists, and it's very crowded, let's say, and sometimes the infrastructure is not built for masses of people, and very small local places, for example, they increase during the season by, let's say, 10 times more, and you can imagine that infrastructure for the wastewater, for example, for the waste in general and so on, is not built for this mass of people. And of course, we have a tendency in some places, we found out that the resident people leaving these places, normally this is the resident place where the people are living, but in some cases the people are leaving because the tourism brings on the one side money, but on the other side higher prices also in the areas. So the prices of, in particular, of living areas, of flats, rents, and so on, they are increasing. Some people can afford, and some cannot afford. So it's, some have advantages, some people have less advantages. So this is a little bit a discussion what is going on also in my country. Sustainability and its measurement is a regional phenomenon, I think, and sustainability cannot measure by only one indicator. I think it's a mixture of different information. I think there's a good basis is a good cooperation between different stakeholders, let's say, but not only the tourism industry, but also other industries or other stakeholders, like from the environmental part, for example, there are a lot of non-governmental organizations available. What is also very important concerning sustainability, I think, is the monitoring, the development of sustainability. So it's not a measurement for 1 year and then stop for the next 10 years. So it must be done continuously over years. Data collection and compilation should be in a consistent way. Well, it's one of the things of statistics. And of course, building these kind of indicators, the development of these indicators, in fact, is in a starting point in the moment, or is a starting is starting right now, and a lot of additional work is needed, and also the results have to be interpreted carefully, of course. And the situation from country to country is quite different concerning this issue. And UNWTO and also the members of the group, they are quite aware of this fact. But it's an interesting, it's an interesting discussion concerning this issue. Okay, so this a little bit my outlook, let's say, concerning tourism statistics. On the one hand, the big data issue, which is coming in more and more, and on the other hand, the extension of the concept and the extension of the measurement of tourism, which is coming in here, at least on the international level, measuring sustainable tourism. Of course, this is not a full list of developments, of future developments, but I took those two issues and those two topics, which are from an international level and from my point of view, one of the most important ones. Okay, are there any questions, concerns about this, what I mentioned, big data? Big data again, realism is good to have in this area also. Because I remember we were starting talking with the national operators, so with the mobile national operators, it was 5 or 6 years ago, and it's a very, let's say, long-term process, discussing with them this kind of issues. And it's the same valid with other institutions like Booking.com, for example. I remember not we were discussing, but on the Eurostat level or Airbnb, there was a conference between Eurostat and Airbnb, and in one meeting, the Airbnb people did not arrive, so they say no, we are not interested. The second meeting, I think, was more successful. But there you can see this kind of this kind of companies. These are multinational companies, and they do whatever they want, and they do what the business is. So they want to make business, and that's it. But nevertheless, and as I heard during lunch break, there are a lot of activities on the national level how to be successful in cooperation with this kind of companies and new developments. Okay, yeah, please.
My name is Virat. I'm representing Association of Air Travel Agents. I would like to ask how you manage the ecotourism, comparing what is happening now in Thailand. We have quite a big number of tourists again, it's become over-tourism in some places, especially national park, marine parks around the southern part of Thailand, for instance. So I would like to ask how you manage this case, or you have the data, the number of the global ecotourism, as how many percentage? Or in Thailand, we have still very small number of this kind of hardcore tourists come to visit. So, but I think it's not seriously managed according to what it should be planned for the ecotourism coming up as a quality tourism country.
Well, it's a difficult question concerning ecotourism. First of all, whatever ecotourism is, I can tell you, my brother was coming to Thailand about 30 years ago to Koh Samui, and it was empty. So I remember he made photos, and he was sitting on the beach alone with his partner in this time, and I think it's changed totally this area. And maybe he was one of these ecotourists in the past. And so what I wanted to say, it's very difficult to define ecotourism. What is ecotourism? Maybe those people who are staying in camping sites are ecotourists. In Austria, I must say that I would say in the general meaning of ecotourism, there are not many ecotourists, because the most people are coming, for example, in winter season for skiing. I would say they are not ecotourists. I mean, they are coming for skiing reasons. And in Austria, there are not many areas which are not. I mean, there are some areas. Well, there are some areas where you can find less tourists, and for example, for families and so on. And we have one. Maybe you can call it ecotourism. It's tourism to farmers. So on the farmer side. So they are, but in the most cases, these are families with small children, and this kind of destinations are quite popular for families, because the children and also the parents, they can look how the farming is going on, and they're looking into the animals and so on. So this is, I would say, it's not a mass tourism phenomenon, and it's a very local. There you have to eat, or you must eat, or you want to eat local foods and so on, not imported food and so on. So this I would call ecotourism, and we have some places. And concerning measurements, I mean, we have concerning farming or farming tourism, we can divide in regard to private accommodation, if this is an accommodation including farming or not including farming. So in the case if the farmer is renting out accommodation, then we have this kind of data, how many overnight stays they stay and so on. And on the other side, we don't have much information concerning, well, we don't have information concerning other ecotourism. So tourism, I think in Austria, the tourism destination is well known for skiing, and in summer for maybe we have small lakes and people going there, but the real ecotourism, rucksack. So when you have the rucksack, then or young people, then they have not so much. They're not requiring much high standards of accommodation. This kind of people you can call ecotourists. But the real measurement of ecotourism, I must say, we don't have too much information. But you can find some niches, as I said, farm tourism, for example. Well, I don't know which kind of tourism you can think of in Thailand, apart from tourism in the coastal areas, but these, again, I wouldn't call it as ecotourism. Thank you. Our strategy in this way is like this, that of course it would be nice to have all the data available, present all the data, but on the other side you need to have people who are dealing with this data, as I mentioned, data scientists. But the tendency of these organizations is in that way that they want to provide aggregates of data. And because in the beginning there was the idea that we receive all the data, but it was, being honest, unrealistic. And now there is the tendency that they send us packages, for example. In the moment we are in the contact with two, but with one we have a concrete project that will send us the data, hopefully during August, July, August. And then we have the responsibility to look to this data and compare the data with our overnight accommodation statistics data, and to find algorithm to make estimates for those regions for which we don't have any data. Because in some regions of Austria we don't have any data concerning tourists, because we include only those municipalities who have more than 1,000 overnight stays per year. So in some municipalities, in small municipalities, we don't have any data. So with the help and with the support of this data, we could do some estimates. But beforehand, we have to compare our data with their data to find the differences, and this could be an estimation basis for these regions for which we don't have any data. So this is a little bit the idea behind. But to answer your question, it's yes, that we are receiving aggregate data, so not data sets, which is anyway very difficult to handle, because it's millions of data sets per day, I would say. And there's another issue in Austria. The telecommunication law is quite strict concerning the data security for personal data, and they have to cancel the data after 24 hours. So anyway, they have to cancel everything, and which is not useful for tourism statistics, because normally, I mean, it's useful for single visitors, but normally the people stay longer, and so it would be useful to have data for a longer duration of stay. But it's because of law, it's not possible. But anyway, we receive it.
Professor Peter, in your conclusion, you mentioned that sustainability is a regional phenomenon. I'm not sure whether you could elaborate more on this point, or you can give us an example how sustainability is defined in different contexts.
Yes, it's a regional phenomenon, and by the way, UNWTO is also collecting pilot studies from countries. So maybe there is a kind of pilot study already available also in your country, in Thailand, concerning this issue, and but in fact it's a regional issue. So if you are comparing, let's say, wastewater, if you compare this with the mountain area and compare the coastal area, I think it's, with one indicator it's not possible to for both areas in one indicator. I think it doesn't make too much sense. For example, I can give the Austrian example for the water use, or the water use in general, which is not a particular problem in my country because of the snowing areas. There's a lot of let's say a lot of water available, but still in winter there's a lot of water use which is collected beforehand, let's say, in artificial lakes for snowing machines, because we are facing, as you all know, climate change issues, and the threshold, the limit of snow, the snow limit in mountains is rising up. So normally there was below 1,000 meter, there was some snow, but now this line is going up and going up. Now we have, I think it's around in average 1,500 meters, but below we have slopes, and people want to have fun on skis on snow, and so therefore artificial snow has to be produced. But this artificial snow is using a lot of water. There are artificial lakes, they are filled during the summer season, but still there's some water use. So it makes no sense, for example, now to compare these regions with Vienna, let's say Vienna, a big city. So therefore, this measurement has to be done on a region level. First of all, these indicators have to be developed, and then the second issue, and this is one of the challenges, of course, to have the right data available on regional level. This might be a little bit the challenge. If you think, for example, it's not only the region means not only the administrative area, but it's for example, in a coastal area, it's not based on administrative units, but it's the coast. So you have to define the coast beforehand, before you're starting with this kind of work. Seems there are no questions for the moment. Okay, so well, I have to say that already I mentioned some of the issues, but nevertheless I will start a little bit with TSA giving an overview of tourism satellite accounting. But I think the more important presentation, at least from my point of view, is then the second one concerning the purpose and role of TSA, in particular including policy implications. First of all, tourism satellite accounting, very much in the beginning, what is accounting or satellite accounting in general. So satellite accounting is an extension of the system of national accounts. So it's following the rules of system of national accounts. They have the same accounts, they have similar tables, but it is extended for different purposes. As I mentioned before, it's not only tourism, but it's also agriculture, environment, health accounts, and so on. So satellite accounts provides additional information for various sectors, so like the tourism. And as you know, tourism is not an own industry, or it's not an own sector in the national account statistics. The reason is very simple, that tourism affects a lot of sectors. So it's not only most people say, well, it's the effects concern the hotel industry, or let's say the food and beverage industry. But of course, it has a lot of effects also to the transport industry. It has a lot of effects to the cultural, let's say, to cultural industry, to the sport industry, for example, and so on, or to the entertainment industry. So there are a lot of contacts of tourism to a lot of industries, which are defined in the national account statistics, and therefore a system has to be developed which concerns in particular tourism, and this is the tourism satellite account. There is in satellite accounting, there's a linkage, not only in the tourism field, but also in other fields, between monetary indicators and non-monetary indicators. So, for example, in the environmental accounting, there is a linkage between flows and monetary information. Monetary information based on national accounts, but there is also, for example, there's the material flow account in the environmental accounting, and this is a physical account, so it has nothing to do with monetary, but both systems are put together. And this is, for example, we have a manual for this, and this is the system of environmental and economic accounting, which is international standard. So what is tourism satellite accounting in particular? It's mentioned here. We have in SNA, so in the System of National Account 2008, there is a long chapter which is dealing with satellite accounting. One of these is tourism satellite accounts. And we have also a chapter on the EU level, European Union level. It's the system of the European system of accounting, which is, of course, quite in line with the system of national accounting. And there's also a long chapter concerning tourism. And what is the, let's say, the challenge or the problem with both systems? And it's mentioned here that SNA 2008, but also ESA 2010, does not distinguish between a shoe purchased by a visitor or purchased by a resident. And this is the main criteria to find out what is bought or what is bought by a tourist and what is bought by a resident. Because in the case of shoes, of course, not only a tourist is buying shoes, but also the resident people are buying shoes. But there's a different expenditure. One is the tourism expenditure, the other is the household consumption, it's part of the household consumption. So this has to be found out, and therefore these tourism satellite accounts are developed, and what is important in the system, it integrates supply side information and demand side information. So this is one of the advantage of this system. So links, the TSA links also macroeconomic analysis. It's quite important. It links also different forms of tourism. So the domestic tourism, the inbound tourism, and the outbound tourism. And it is using the core accounts of the system of national accounts. And one of the core accounts is, for example, the production account, which is comparable with the TSA table 5. Well, this is another slide concerning tourism satellite accounting, and it shows the economy. So we have a lot of sectors. We have here agricultural sector, we have manufacturing, we have electricity, we have wholesale, we have financial insurance activities, and so on, which is a classification in line with the industrial classification, so the ISIC, so the UN classification of industries. And the tourism satellite account is picking out some of these industries, and these industries is mainly the accommodation, the food and beverage industry, which is here in the middle. And on the other side, we have the transportation, the passenger transport industry, so airlines, railway, taxi, buses, and so on. And we have another industry, it's here mentioned arts, entertainment, and recreation. So tourism satellite account is focusing mainly on these industries. In total, we have 12 tourism industries which are defined as tourism characteristic industries. So TSA for what for? Well, the value added effects. So the impact on the economy is one of the important issues, and on the other side, the employment is an important issue. And of course, tourism is one of the industries which is decreasing unemployment, in particular in areas where tourism industry is increasing. It's increasing now. On the one side, we have the policy. On the other side, we have statistics. The policy, of course, they want to have more. They want to have more knowledge about the economic value of tourism. On the other side, statistics. TSA is one of the tools where you can integrate a lot of data sources, a lot of statistics available. And this is one of the advantage from the compilers, TSA compilers point of view, to see in the process of reconciliation between supply and demand side information, to see more about the quality of the data that you are using. Well, here the economic aim, I think it's quite clear to find out the value added, mainly output minus input. So in national account terms, it's intermediate consumption. It's mentioned here again that national accounts, in national account there is not an own sector called tourism because of various reasons, what I already mentioned. So this is this slide shows or should show the difference between supply and use side information. So on the one side you have the supply side information, it's the tourism industries, but of course the tourism industries, let's say, are also used by resident people. So let's take out this example what is mentioned here. Also non-visitors, resident people going to restaurants, and one of the ideas of TSA to find out what is the proportion of this tourism expenditure and the non-tourism expenditure, for example, in restaurants. On the other side, we have the use information, and this is based on tourism surveys, and these are tourism consumption or tourism expenditure, so visitors in their non-usual environments. And what has to be done now is to integrate both systems, both information, supply and demand side information, and to find out what is the tourism, or what is the ratio of tourism consumption related to total consumption. And this can be done by comparing supply side information and demand side information to find out in the end what is the tourism, or what is the value added per industry, what is the tourism direct value added by industry. These are the 10 tables, as you're aware of. Tourism consumption 1 to 4, then we have the supply side information 5 and 6, 7 employment, 8 investments of gross fixed capital formation, 9 collective consumption, and number 10 is the non-monetary indicators. Well, here again, but I already showed this or presented this slide concerning basic terms of visitor, and you remember in the morning I presented this slide, what is a visitor, what is a traveler. So I do not want to go again into detail, but of course TSA is a tourism statistics concept. It's not a balance of payments concept. So TSA is also following the requirements of the international recommendations on tourism statistics. And there must be a difference between both systems. So the monetary flows showing, and it is shown here in this slide, we have the non-residents on the one side, and this is tourism. This is a tourism activity. So if non-residents are coming to your country, mainly they are tourists, they are visitors, and this is their non-usual environment. On the other side, we have the resident people. When they are traveling within the country, there could be two possibilities. Either they are tourists, or they are having leisure activities in the usual environment. So if, for example, if you are staying in your town, or in your city, or in your residence, and when you go to a theater, or when you go to the cinema, then it's a leisure activity within your usual environment. And here it's marked gray. It means that it's not part of the tourism. So it's not a visitor. You are not a visitor, you are not a same-day visitor, but you are doing activities within your usual environment, in your living area, in your working area. And then residents can, of course, also go abroad, so outside of the country borders, and this is a non-usual environment activity. Well, the TSA concept distinguishes between tourism characteristic, tourism connected, and non-tourism related production or industries and valuables. And of course the consumption comprises tourism characteristic, tourism connected, non-tourism related expenditure and valuables. Just giving you an example for tourism connected, which is under other consumption within the recommendations on TSA. So for example, here it's mentioned restaurants or canteens, because canteens or restaurants, they might be used also from resident persons or resident people, and therefore it's called a tourism connected, because there is a connection to tourism, but not all the consumption or all the expenditure is due to tourists. And then on the other side, we have a very important part. It's the tourism non-tourism related industries or goods and services. What is this? This is mainly the retail, for example, the retail trade or other services. Here it's mentioned, retail trade, and let's say here hairdressers, for example. Because this is also used, of course, from resident people, but it's a non-tourism related industry. In principle, it has nothing to do with tourism, but it is used by tourists. And this is quite important, because if tourism is declining in a region, it does not concern only hotels, but it concerns, of course, all these non-tourism related industries. Because if tourists are missing, they don't visit, let's say, this kind of industries, hairdressers and so on, or there might be a massage institute there and so on, so they're not going there anymore, and so it's not only a suffering of these tourism characteristic industries, but also other industries, surrounding industries, let's say, or here in a more technical term, the non-tourism related industries are also suffering. So this is a circle, let's say, which is quite important for regions. That in many regions, tourism does not concern only hotel and restaurants, of course. Yes, here again, it's mentioned, or it's another picture or another slide concerning what is included, connected and interrelated tables. So it's a summary of the tables here. And also below in this slide, it's mentioned about, in fact, we have the manuals available. There is a manual available on WTO. By the way, it was a cooperational work between OECD and Eurostat, so it's not only a product of WTO, it's a product from these three organizations. And I remember myself, I was involved from the Eurostat side a little bit in this project, and it was a difficult discussion. It's a compromise between these. There is another manual available on the European level, on the Eurostat level. It's this European Implementation Manual on TSA. And there is another manual available on the OECD level, which is also quite useful. It was developed before 2001, and the name is Measuring the Role of Tourism in OECD Economies. And I must say, from my point of view, it's quite useful. It gives a lot of inputs and a lot of inputs concerning methodological issues, and I think it's quite useful to rely also on this level. Okay, well, here I want to go through a little bit through the tables, the TSA tables, but I will do it quite quickly. Maybe I want to mention some of the issues. tourism expenditure is one issue. It is concerned within TSA table 1, 2, and 3, inbound, domestic, and outbound. And but we are speaking also from tourism consumption. So if you add up table 1 and 2, you get tourism expenditure, and tourism consumption is including additional issues, additional items. I will come back to this within TSA table 4. So, well, here's again mentioned, speak about expenditure, inbound, domestic, and outbound tourism. Maybe what is important concerning domestic tourism, concerning TSA table 2, I think this is quite it's special for this table that we are speaking about domestic tourism consumption, expenditure, concerning the expenditure when a resident is traveling within their own country and he's spending something, then it's a domestic expenditure. But a domestic expenditure in the TSA meaning is also this expenditure for outbound trips. So if you, just an example, if you make holidays abroad in a camping site and you're buying the camping equipment in your own country, then it's a domestic expenditure. Also, you are going abroad, but it's contributing to the domestic economy, and therefore this kind of expenditure when you're going abroad and you're doing the expenditure within your country, then it's part of the domestic expenditure. It's different from the TSA Level 3, outbound tourism expenditure. Only tourism expenditure is included what you are doing outside of your country, and it doesn't affect the economy of your own country. And therefore, for TSA reasons, mainly TSA Level 1 and 2 are the most important ones. Okay, here, and the structure is quite similar from one table to another. Only the content, of course, is different. So here you have the inbound tourism expenditure by products and different forms of or classes of visitors. So it's on the one side we have the inbound tourism expenditure by tourists, overnight tourists, and the same-day visitors, and then you have the total visitor. And then you have the different products on the one side, which is in line with the tourism industries, of course. It must be in line with tourism industries. And you see, we have the accommodation, food and beverage, we have the passenger transport expenditure, cultural, sport, and we have the country-specific tourism characteristic goods and services. These two, the last two, there is no definition, in fact. But if a country is saying, for example, for particular souvenirs, let's say, or for particular services, which are quite country-specific, additional estimates can be done for this country-specific tourism services, tourism characteristic services. Let's say maybe in Thailand, massage, for example, is quite famous for. So this service might be shown here in an own line, and if the data are available. Of course, this is a question of data availability, but maybe, and I know you have a service where you have a very detailed questionnaire concerning the items of expenditure, and this might be used for this tourism characteristic services, for the expenditure for this tourism characteristic services. But this is let's say, if a service is quite important and it's related to tourism, then additional information are quite useful. And in these tables, there is a possibility which is foreseen for this. Well, and one thing I have to mention is net versus gross valuation. It concerns package tours. Because package tours, as the name is mentioning, it's a package of different services. And what is necessary for TSA reasons and also for national account reasons is to unbundle this package, which means to find out what is the share of the different services included in packages. Because it's in the most packages it's included transport and hotel, the hotel service, and the important thing is to find out what is the share of these packages. So to find out what is the intermediate consumption in national terms, national account terms, of tour operators. Normally you can find out this from business statistics. There should be some for the production of this package. You have to have intermediate consumption, you have to have input. And the input is the hotel service, for example. The input is the hotel product, the input is the transport product. And this might be a good basis for doing these estimations. And these parts of the services must be allocated to in the table to the accommodation service, for example. The part of the transport part is to be allocated to the transport part, to the transport industry, air industry, for example, air passenger transport, for example. So this is a little bit the challenge, of course, to do it, but it must be done because it's a requirement from the national account point of view. So this is a little bit the challenge to deal with. And there is one line concerning it's mentioned here, travel agencies and other reservation services, and this part. So it's not the package here; it's only the margin, or it's only the income of the turnover of the tour operators, so to say, the commission, let's say. So what is so it's this part, what is the tour operator earning from, but without the package parts like accommodation and transport, for example. Of course, in some packages there are other things included, like car renting, for example, and this part, of course, must be find out again and allocated to the respective industry. Domestic tourism, it's TSA Table 2, and here, as I mentioned before, you see, first of all, we have domestic trips, and then we have outbound trips, and domestic trips, residents traveling within the country, and the domestic part of outbound trips is the second part of this table, and then you have to sum up all the results, and you have all types of trips included, and this is the total domestic tourism expenditure defined as it is defined in the tourism separate account. Table 3 is concerning outbound, so it concerns the expenditure which is done outside of your economy, outside of your country, and it does not affect the economy, the own economy, but it affects the destination's economy, of course. Here's at Table 4, it's called internal tourism consumption. Now we are leaving the notion expenditure, we are coming to the tourism consumption, and this, as I mentioned before, is including additional items if they are necessary, if they are available, this kind of information. And you see it here below in the second part of this slide, imputed value of partner transaction. What does this mean? For example, temporary exchange of vacation homes. For example, this might be one of these partner transactions. Then, of course, it might happen that that the company is paying for their employees holidays or at least accommodation, and this is meant here the net costs. So the net cost means what is paid by the company. Sometimes I know it from Austria, for example, the central bank, they have They have one hotel, I think. They own the hotel, so they are paying for the people working there. Let's say at least some days when they are staying in this hotel. And this is another component of the internal tourism consumption. Of course, in the most cases, you have to do estimates because you won't get the information directly from the business, from the companies, but still some estimates could be done. And thirdly, there is another issue, is government consumption expenditure. And what is mentioned here, for example, museums. You get a better rate for families, for example. And this is mainly supported by the government. So you have the market price, but you have reduced prices under special circumstances and for families, for example. And this expenditure, so this governmental expenditure should be added also here under other components of internal tourism consumption. This means not consumption in cash or expenditure in cash, as we have it in TSA table 1 to 3, but this is so-called in kind. And summing up expenditure in cash and kind, this is the total internal tourism consumption. So this is the main outcome of this table. Yes, here's the table again. And 5 and 6 now concerns the tourism demand side, the tourism supply side. Tourism 5 is very much in line with the production account, but it is limited to the tourism industries, of course. So it's adapted and adjusted for the tourism statistics or tourism proposals, but it's very much in line with the supply use tables of national account or the input-output tables of national account. You see the rows shows the commodities and the columns show the tourism industries. Here it's the table with the 12 on the top. You don't see because it's bad quality. You see the tourism industries, and in the first column you see all the products. Well, the output then is the supply based on producer prices. Coming to TSA table 6 directly, this is the main table, I would say, because here tourism demand information and tourism supply information is coming together. It is very much comparable, or it's comparable with TSA table 5, but you have additional columns. You see, you have a column called tourism shares, and in the end, you have additional columns concerning net taxes, imports. This is necessary. Technically, it's necessary because TSA table 5, the result is based on producer prices. If you want to have purchaser prices, you have to add imports and also the taxes, less subsidies. Because you want to compare supply and demand side information. Demand side means, of course, purchaser price, and therefore you have to adjust this information. And this is mainly done in this table. In the last column, you will find out the tourism ratio, which is the tourism use of products. So, for example, accommodation, you will have 100%, more or less 100% tourism use. Transport, it's not 100% tourism use, because the railway is also used by resident people. So maybe the tourism use is, let's say, 30%. Just an estimate now from my side. But for example, for the entertainment industry, or let's say for cinemas, also the resident people go there, so the tourism use is not 100%. Let's say it's 10%, and so on. And this is the last column to find out these proportions between demand, tourism demand, and total demand by product. Yeah, here it's mentioned again. Well, and just to more or less finish in time, it's TSA Table 7, it's concerning employment. Employment in the tourism industries. And what is important also is here, we have not only the number of employed people, but we have also the full-time equivalents mentioned here. This is important in particular in the tourism sector because not all people are working full-time in the tourism industry. They're working half-time, and to have a good, and this is also in line with national accounts, to have a good overview of the employment in the tourism industry, you have to make an analysis based on full-time equivalents, which is lower than heads, of course. So it means if you have two persons employed, one is half-time, one is full-time equivalent. So it's not two heads, but it's one and a half full-time equivalent. Here, this table is concerning tourism gross fixed capital formation of tourism and other industries. This is a table, as I said before, not very well developed in European countries, but as I've heard from your colleagues here, you have a table. It is rather demanded also from various institutions also in Austria, because it's very interesting also from the budget point of view, from the public budget point of view, what is the investment in the tourism industry and who is investing in which assets and so on. So this is quite useful information also for the tourism industries, if the data are available. In Austria, we don't have data concerning this table so far. TSA Table 9 is tourism collective consumption by different levels of government, because, for example, in the Austrian case, as I mentioned before, regions have their own budget for tourism purposes, and therefore there is quite important information to have the levels of government, so the consumption for tourism purposes on national level and local level. Because on local level, maybe they have their own budget due to tourism taxes, for example, and they're using this budget for tourism promotion, for tourism bureaus, for example, for other administrative issues which are necessary for tourism purposes. And TSA Table 10 is concerning non-monetary indicators, and it's including some physical indicators which should be available, like for inbound tourism, for example, domestic tourism, outbound tourism, same-day visitors, tourists, and so on. Concerning inbound tourism, in particular in your case, information is available about the means of transport, for example, how they arrive to your country, number of establishment by number, according to the number of employed people in the establishment, might be available in business statistics, for example. So there's a lot of huge information pool, which is quite useful, and you can compare this information, this non-monetary information, also with monetary information out of tourism satellite accounts in the folder. Okay, this was a very quick overview and a rough overview of tourism satellite account and the various tables which are recommended by the framework to fill in and to build on. Okay, so.
I have a question regarding the valuables, because in the morning session you mentioned that it should not count as part of the consumption of the tourists, and then in the afternoon it is part of the expenditure. And I thought that it is probably because it is some sort of goods and services and it's kind of export of those. But when you said it is valuable, so it should be part of the asset. or it is in the part of the capital account also. Could you elaborate more on all of these things?
Well, I know valuables is a little bit a tricky issue, but it was included. It was not included in the old. I mean, in the TSA recommended methodological framework 2001, but due to national account requirements, it was included in the new version to put in these valuables. The valuables are defined, I think, quite well in the system of national account. It's one of the paragraphs I also mentioned in my, or it's also mentioned in my presentation, and it concerns products and services of high value, whatever high value is, of course. And this is again a definition of the country. Maybe it should be in line with the customs rules. It means when you are every country has different rules concerning in customs rules. So if you are coming in, for example, you are allowed to pay nothing if it's not exceeding a particular value. So, for example, when I buy a picture from Picasso, then maybe I have a problem in the border, in the customs, because then I have to pay taxes. But in many cases, in many countries, there's a threshold where you are allowed to import these products and where you should pay taxes, a kind of custom tax. And this might be the threshold to say it's a valuable good and it's a non-valuable good. For example, in our survey, we are saying that if a product has a value more than, I think now we have 300 euro, then we classify it as a valuable. But we don't have, being honest, we don't have too much cases in this respect, because we are asking, as I mentioned before, we are asking the people, about 3,500 people and persons, and there are not many cases we are capturing, and where we have people who are buying valuables outside the country or within the country or wherever. So the valuables is a little bit a tricky one. We are doing, for TSA reasons, we are doing estimates. The basis for the estimates is this survey, what we have, and we have some information also from the foreign trade statistics. We have some basic information. Then, based on this, we are doing some estimates. What is the amount of these valuables? From a survey, it's quite difficult to find out if a person is importing or exporting valuable goods. But it's part. But again, it's part of expenditure. It's part of the tourism expenditure. But I have my doubts that many countries have the possibility to find out based on a survey what is the amount people spending for valuables. I mean, for example, jewelry is one of the issues. So if, for example, if you go to some countries are famous for buying jewelries of a high value, and then you can assume that a lot of people are doing expenditure on these valuables. But like in Austria, I cannot think much about valuables. I don't know. We are famous for Mozart, the composer, and we have Mozart bowls, but they are not very valuable. So when the people are buying these sweets, then it's not a valuable issue, in fact.
I think it is part of, because our value, it is in our case because we are selling a lot of jewelries, and we are not sure whether we include the jewelries or valuable as part of the capital account amount. This is as part of the balance of payment concept. So I'm starting confusing about how when we try to put in the part of the jewelry to tourists, to be part of the travel expense or the capital.
Okay, I understand. Of course, there must be a difference between capital investment. If it's an investment, it shouldn't be. So it's also excluded in the system of national account. So if, for example, if you buy a house or I don't know, then it's a capital investment and it has nothing to do with tourism expenditure. So there's a differentiation between capital investment and tourism expenditure. Having in mind that it's not easy to distinguish between both, but well, in the case of buying a house, I think it's quite easy. But I suppose you are from the central bank, maybe there. So then it's in the capital account if it's an investment. But if it's an expenditure, which is not, being honest, not easy to find out, then it should be included in this. So if tourists, for example, and I don't know, I think it's a phenomenon in Thailand that people coming here and for their retirement, they are buying flats to stay there, to stay in Thailand. But this is an investment. This is not an expenditure, tourism expenditure. But if a tourist is coming here and buying jewelry of high value, then of course it's part of his valuables and part of the tourism expenditure. Or if you go to, since I was last time in Iran, carpet, for example. If you buy a carpet, in the most cases it's a high valuable good, and this would be part of his expenditure. I know because you're saying confusing, it's a confusing issue to find out what is the threshold between both capital investment and expenditure, tourism expenditure.
Thank you very much for the valuable information about tourism satellite account in this part of afternoon session. It's time for coffee break, and then we will have more comments and discussion after the break. All right? We have actually it's already past the. It's now 2:45, right? So we will have 15 minutes for coffee break, like 3 and 5 minutes. Okay, 3 5. We will come back here at 3:05.
Let's say less technical. It's more about the purpose and the use of tourism satellite accounting, taking into account, let's say, policy wishes and the possibilities from the TSA point of view. In the beginning, in my presentation, there are some slides which are already presented, so I will jump to the first one. It's slide number 8. Concerning the use, here's mentioned the use of TSA. And what is the use of TSA? Well, I think it should be rather clear what is the use of TSA. But first of all, TSA is describing the economic importance of tourism in a country. It gives rather detailed information on visitor consumption in relation to inbound, outbound, and domestic tourism. It is linking, and it's one of the main use and the main advantages of TSA is to link monetary with non-monetary information. It is it should be effective for the public policies. It is a robust information on the role tourism is playing and can play in the economy, and it brings new recognition and confidence in tourism. I think the last sentence is quite important because normally, maybe you know, out of national account statistics based on sector, based on agriculture, for example, or building site, what is the importance in these areas? But there was in the past not much information available on tourism. but TSA provides the possibility to say more and to find or to bring more, as it's mentioned here, recognition and confidence in tourism for all, in particular for the tourism policy. What is a very important advantage? It's mentioned here. It is include all kind of tourism activities, which means, as I mentioned before, in the accommodation statistics, for example, you have only the overnight tourists, but here this is including the same-day visitors, the overnight tourists. It is including visiting friends and relatives. It is including second homes activities. It gives also a greater credibility of tourism statistics. So tourism statistics is, let's say, it's gaining more importance and more relevance. By the way, tourism statistics and TSA is also very relevant for national account sometimes. When we are discussing, for example, with national account people concerning package tours, I think tourism statistics can provide very useful information for their calculations, for their estimates. So I think tourism statistics and part of tourism statistics can feed other statistical areas quite well. And one example is, for example, national account statistics. It provides an informed vision of the tourism industry, information for companies, for small, medium enterprises, and it is a basis for research and innovative methodologies. So it's a basis, for example, for forecasting models. So it can be used for forecasting, and international comparison is it's improving with tourism satellite accounts. What else? As I mentioned already, reconciliation and benchmark tool concerning the data used. So compare supply and demand side data, combining and using different data sources. So this is another advantage. Cooperation, I think it's also a starting of cooperation between different institutions. As you are sitting here, you are coming from different institutions, but in fact it touches all many institutions like national tourism authorities, ministries, statistical offices, central bank, and so on. And it's also a good opportunity to do best estimates and extrapolation methods and modeling, because this is necessary. It's the same in national account statistics. You have to do assumptions, you have to do estimates, and this is also very valid for tourism satellite accounting. Advantages. Here's summed up again. The advantages, starting point for cooperation. You can start with consideration concerning the quality of your statistics, of the tourism statistics used. Benchmarking demand and supply, I mentioned. Confidence related to tourism statistics is increasing, and cross-border networking is also increasing. As I'm sitting here, I could call it a cross-border networking, but this is also a cross-border networking, for example, with neighboring countries, if we are thinking of taking mirror statistics, as I mentioned before. Well, I think I take out one point is here interlinks between tourism industries and the rest of the economy. As I mentioned before, if tourism is declining, this is not only concerning the accommodation industry or the food and beverage industry, it is also concerning other industries. So tourism satellite accounts allows interlinkages or the impacts also, to say more about the impacts to other industries, non-tourism related industries. Employment is an important part, the structure of the main visitors. Yeah. Well, they are coming to the point, tourism policy expectations, how to feed them. Well, I don't know whether we can feed all policy expectations concerning with TSA results. But I think from my point of view, it's very important to have, as a prerequisite, to do so a close cooperation with research and stakeholders. So with research institutes and stakeholders. In the Austrian case, we are doing this project TSA in cooperation with the Austrian Research Institute. So for example, we are responsible to do the basic satellite account concerning direct effects, and the institute is doing estimates concerning the indirect effects. What is also necessary, of course, is to do on a regular basis working groups. We have this kind of working group more or less on a yearly basis, but not only concerning TSA, but tourism statistics in general, and we invite all the stakeholders, for example, central bank, tourist administration, research institutes, institutes concerning tourism, which are concerned with tourism on regional level and so on. At least to discuss different ideas, to discuss the results sometimes, if these results are reliable. I think this is quite important when you publish results on TSA, to discuss this also with the stakeholders, with the hotel industry association, for example, or with other industries or with other stakeholders, to find out if these figures are reliable. You can do TSA extensions because based on the manual or the framework, only the direct effects are included. Concerning the indirect effects, there is no recommendations because indirect effects are done mainly on multipliers based on input-output statistics, for example, which is done in our case by our colleagues in the Austrian research institutes. They are applying on a model. It's called Escanso model, so it's a special model to find out about these indirect effects. So this is not, let's say, a survey-based work concerning indirect effects, but it's based on a model. What is a policy wish, of course, is to have regional results, regional TSAs. As I mentioned, in our case, we have for 3 provinces we are doing regional accounts, but with some, let's say, restrictions, because we don't have any regional input-output statistics or regional supply-use tables. We have some kind of tables adjusting these tables for tourism purposes, but we are not, but we don't have a full supply-use table on the regional table. And therefore, it's very difficult to do regional accounts or accounts on a subnational level, and not on a local level. We have sometimes questions from local authorities, please, can you do a TSA on let's say, on a municipality level or a very disaggregated level, a regional level, but this is simply not possible because we don't have any information concerning tourism expenditure, concerning supply side information, and so on. So therefore, in the most cases, we have to refuse and saying, well, sorry, we cannot do it without additional data. And additional data would mean that we have to do additional survey on a local level, but this is again, this is a matter of costs, of course. What is important, at least in my country, but also in other countries, I think and it's mentioned here, to demystify TSA. There are a lot of interpretations going on within TSA or innovation to TSA, and of course it's not an easy issue, an easy topic, being honest, because it's very much related to national account rules, but never. And it's a really challenge to present the results sometimes to the broader public, but it's possible, and of course some work has to be done in this field to discuss the results. And by the way, I have in the presentation last year in Manila from Thailand, the TSA Thailand, it was impressive for me how you're presenting the results. And it's quite easily understandable from my point of view at least, but I think also for the broader public. And yes, this was, by the way, impressive presentation about the data dissemination concerning tourism satellite accounting. And of course, is TSA, this is the last sentence, but not the least but not last, or the last but not least, the last sentence is concerning depending on the amount of financial means. Yes, TSA is not cheap. I mean, it's not a product you produce in 2 days. And this is sometimes not easy to communicate also to the policy. We would like to do more, but we have a budget for this tourism satellite account, and we cannot do more with this very low, let's say, limited budget means. Well, this slide is quite, from my point of view, important because concerning the restrictions and limitations. First of all, well, the analytical and research capacity of TSA is not seen sometimes. It's not realized sometimes. This is one issue. And a third issue, what is mentioned here, is fast available and short-term data. It is not available so far in the most countries, which means, for example, maybe in, let's say, in Russia, we have in the moment this World Championship on soccer. You cannot find out by TSA in the next month what is the effect, what is the impact, the economic impact of this event. Maybe you never can show this by using tourism satellite accounting, and you cannot show it in a very short-term timetable. Because you have to have the national account data. Normally the national account data are not available they are available in let's say average in 1 year after the reference period, and you need this kind of data. Of course you can do the TSA calculation based on some forecastings, but to have the real data you have to wait for the national account data. And therefore this short-term let's say quick indicators based on TSA, maybe you can do it after a while when you have long time series, then there might be a possibility, but normally it's not possible to present very short-term data based on the TSA results. Mentioned also detailed results are not available, in the most cases on a very disaggregated local level. Well, here, one of the last points that's mentioned here, impact on special events. This is, in the most cases, not possible, but very highly demanded, sometimes from the policy point of view. Well, here it's mentioned because this was once demanded and required to make a TSA, to do a TSA on a market level. Mainly they are not available, what means market level, so a TSA in the Austrian case from the German market. So you take out, let's say, the most important market and make a TSA on the market level, on this market level. Mainly it's not possible because of lack of information, detailed information. The last point is concerning sometimes TSAs made by different organizations. As we talked yesterday with some colleagues, it's mainly WTTC. WTTC is doing TSA calculations for the whole world. But I have to say that WTTC is a lobby lobby organization in the tourism field, sponsored by the tourism industry. I'm not sure whether they are quite independent institution. And secondly, they are doing DSA based on a model. And they are taking all the data available on the international level from the UN, from IMF, from World Bank and so on, and they put it, let's say, together, and the outcome is a tourism satellite account. They call it tourism satellite account, but they don't have too much detailed information as you have on national level. So be cautious. I know they publish this quite often for all the countries, and I'm sure for Thailand there is also TSA available for my country the same. They have a very colorful publication, but I have my doubts about the quality of this data. And the model, at least in the past, what I remember, was based on a US-American model, which implicates that the travel habits of the Americans, of course, if you are based on the US-American model. So just and there are other organizations doing this kind of things. And here it's one point which is always discussed with the policy is revisions. We have, for example, in Austria we have a time series now starting with the year 2000, and when revisions are necessary, and revisions are sometimes necessary. For example, the change of the SNA. In former times we have SNA 2003, now we have SNA 2008, and the system has to be revised. And of course we have to revise not only the most recent figure, but also the whole time series, which is quite normal in the statistical world, but it's not normal for the users, for the policy. For example, we are doing revisions when we have additional data sources, new data sources, better data sources. Then we incorporate these new data sources, and we incorporate these data sources not only for the most recent year, reference year, but also for the rest of the time series. And this is necessary to do, and as I said, it's quite normal work in the statistical environment. But this causes sometimes discussion with our policy users, because they see that there's a change in the absolute figures. I mean, the trend should be the same, of course, during the years, but the absolute figures are changing. And sometimes it's very difficult and hard to explain why we have to do this. We are saying, well, we have to be in line with SNA, we have to be in line with other international requirements. It's our main, let's say, main work and duty to improve the basics, to improve the statistics, to improve the data sources. But nevertheless, they are sometimes not very happy that, for example, maybe they are happy when the absolute figures are increasing. But sometimes it's not the case, they are decreasing because of revision process, and then there are some ground for discussion. And for them it's not very important if we have to revise or not to revise, but from the statistical point of view, you have to do it. Well, here are some policy questions and some TSA answers. So what is the economic importance of tourism? Well, this might happen quite often. What has to be taken into account is, and I already mentioned, if you follow the international recommendations, it concerns only the direct effects. So indirect effects and induced effects are not part of the manual. You might do estimates, as in our case, done by the Research Institute, or also by the Statistical Office can be done, of course, but this have to be in mind. Yes, this is also if the policy is doing some measures to improve to improve tourism or to change tourism, whatever. They want to know, based on TSA, maybe what is the effect. So then, I don't know, when they have special marketing for some markets, and they want to see what is the effect of these measures based on TSA. Then we have to say, well, this is not really, the TSA cannot show a real picture of this. Well, what is the size and development of the labor market in tourism industries? Employment, or the employment table, TSA table 7, is showing something about the employment effects, but I have to say that this concerns only the tourism industries. So, for example, there are some, maybe some industries with link to tourism, but which are not part of the tourism industries, and the TSA table 7 does not show much on this. So this has to be said if you want to, concerning the interpretation of this, of the result of this table. And what is the economic, social, environmental return of investment in tourism facilities and events? Again, TSA, I think, is not the right tool to say a lot about this issue, because it's because TSA is a macroeconomic tool. It's not a tool on microeconomic levels or on the business level. So it's a macroeconomic tool. So any indicators you want to present and to find out on the business level is not shown within tourism sector. How is tourism being financed? Well, investment-based information is in many cases hardly available. From my point of view, it should be available, easily available, but when I'm talking with national authorities or regional authorities, they are telling me that it's very difficult to divide between tourism-related investment and non-tourism-related investment. I don't know how the reality is, but this is always the information I receive. How tourism will perform in the near future? Well, the TSA cannot say much about the future. Of course, you can do, based on TSA, as I mentioned before, some forecasting. This is done, for example, also in the Austrian case, by the Research Institute, but again, this is a model. It can be true or it cannot be true. It depends on the assumptions within this model. You never know what is happening next year or the year after. A good example for it is the Turkish market, for example. Nobody knew that about the developments in Turkey beforehand, and there was a very high decrease on tourism in Turkey the last years. Now it's increasing again, but this cannot be forecasted. But normally in these forecasting models there are assumptions included, and you have to assume that there are no political changes, the exchange rates are the same, and so on. So this has to be assumed. How many new jobs and additional GDP could be created with more tourism? Another question from the policy side, but estimates might be rather simple, but it cannot be answered by tourism satellite account. It's a relevant question, but it's not based on TSA, cannot be based on TSA. The last, one of the last points is here, seasonality about tourism. A measure of reduction of seasonality in tourism might be based on TSA? No, normally not. Because you have to have, of course, sub-yearly estimates on TSA, quarterly TSAs, but not only quarterly, maybe also monthly TSAs, which is not available in the majority of the countries. And I've heard yesterday you have quarterly estimates on related to TSA, but maybe it does not fit to the seasonality pattern. but in most cases, TSA cannot say much about seasonality, in fact. Well, this some general issues. Maybe last some issues related to TSA in the Austrian from the Austrian point of view. I have shown some of these slides already. Maybe well here, which is specific for Austria, this part it is showing a little bit what is the tourism satellite account about concerning the governance of satellite accounting, tourism satellite accounting. It's commissioned by the ministry. It's done in cooperation with the research institute, which I already mentioned. It's done in the tourism section at Statistics Austria, so not in the national account section, done every year. It's not, and this is, I want to point out this, it's not a perfect system. It's yearly, as far as possible, improved. So if new data are available, there might be a new model available, then this will be taken into account in the new estimates. It's a living system, so it can be improved always, I think. So it's as I mentioned, it's a lifetime. I would say it's a lifetime project. In fact, for those who are compiling TSA, based on the methods of requirements of UNWTO. In the Austrian case, it's not as detailed as required from the UN WTO manual. So we don't have information for all the items mentioned, but we have, let's say, the most important key items. For the most important key items, we have the information available. It is basis for regional TSA and for the employment item, of course. We were starting, just to look a little bit on the development in the Austrian case, we were starting with the TSA recommended framework 2001, so let's say 15 years ago. In 2003, we did the first estimates concerning labor. This was a requirement that was highly demanded by the ministry, and it was also paid by the ministry, so we include this kind of information. And since the reference year 2002, we are doing also some regional estimates on TSA, but not regular. So we have one region, for this region we have yearly estimates, but for Vienna, for example, we have only every second year or every third year information concerning based on TSA results. And I think in some cases it's not really necessary to do yearly estimates because there are not the big changes from one year to another. But maybe after 2 or after 3 years, it's quite worth to do more, to do again a TSA, or to do the most recent TSA estimates. And 2013-14, we are applying or starting applying the requirements on the framework 2008. So these are the internal partners we have for compiling TSA, but it should be rather the same in other organizations or in your case. So we have tourism statistics data, of course, the travel habits, national accounts, supply use tables, private consumption, business statistics. We use short-term statistics, we use structured business statistics, population statistics is used. And we have our external partners in institution. We have the contract partner, it's the Austrian Research Institute, the clients, the Federal Ministry for Sustainability and Tourism. We have the Austrian Tourism Board on board, let's say, the TSA board. And this is mainly due to a survey done in destinations I mentioned. Austrian Central Bank, a very important partner for us, providing data in cooperation with our section concerning credit and debit data, which are necessary for at least credit data for the TSA. So, tourism satellite accounting is simplified but not simple. Simplified in that, in the fact, due to the fact that in Austria we have TSA level 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, and 7. So 8, 9, 10, and 3 is still missing. It's not, the reason is simple, no demand, no supply of these tables. So we don't receive data, we don't receive money for this. We were asking about if there are some interests available concerning this kind of information. It was not, and so we decided, because it's not part of our statistical program. We have a statistical program which is mainly due to the international requirements on the European level. And if there is no international requirement on a legal basis, we do not produce additional statistics, with the exception if there is a contract. And in the case of TSA, for these tables, there is a contract available, a budget available, and so we are doing this kind of statistics. It is mainly based, or it's based on secondary data sources, so existing data sources. We don't do any additional surveys. It would be out of the budget. We're doing estimates and assumptions. We're publishing the data only on current prices, so not on constant prices at least for the moment. We have only key results. It's extended by the indirect effects, and it's extended also by the leisure effects of residents within the usual environment. There are some estimates done by the research institute, but it's outside of the TSA, so it has nothing to do with TSA, because it's this expenditure within usual environment. What I mentioned before, if you go to the cinema, the restaurant within your usual environment, and these effects are some estimates, global, let's say, global estimates available. Well, there are still some challenges, or the remaining challenges here mentioned. Extrapolation indicators, we use the same extrapolation indicators for industries as for commodities. There might some problems. Input-output statistic and supply use tables. It is not so detailed as it should be necessary. As it is necessary for TSA purposes. Mostly we have data on 2-digit level. We would need some more detailed data. Well, there is always a ground for research concerning the composition of the package tours. We have some table or some information available, which I mentioned before concerning the net valuation of the package tours. We have some information available, but this is based on a quite outdated data source, and some adjustments should be necessary also in this field. Still, there's a problem of same-day visitors to receive the data, in particular concerning domestic same-day visitors. Inbound and outbound, we have some quite reliable information from our own service or from mirror statistics, as I mentioned before. But concerning the same-day visitors, domestic same-day visitors, this is we have some data, but let's say the quality is not the best. More detailed based data on passenger transport would be needed also. We have some information based on transport statistics, but still there's also ground for more data, or more research on this kind of data. So the main data sources, I don't want to go too much, and concluding the whole issue concerning the role and the purpose of TSA. I think what is really recommended is cooperation, and it is necessary with external institutions, internal but also external institutions. Compilation between tools and statistics, I think it's quite useful. Close cooperation mentioned. Meetings, yearly basis, as I mentioned, a living system. It could be and it should be yearly improved if possible. Maybe not as detailed as recommended in the manual, but nevertheless, if you have the key figures or some totals of the figures and not maybe not all disaggregated figures, still it's possible to do some DSA. Then a basis for regional DSA, and what is very important also from my point of view is to have a documentation of the methodology used, of the estimates used, of the assumptions, because you can believe me, from one year to another you forget about these things. And if you don't have a quite detailed documentation what you are doing, then it's quite difficult for yourself when you compile DSA, and secondly, it's quite difficult for persons who are getting involved more and more to do DSA. And therefore, it's always good to have a quite detailed documentation how these figures are compiled, where are the data sources, what are maybe the assumptions you are using, what is the model about, and so on. So this is quite useful. Improving the reliability, still underestimated, I think, concerning the analytical possibilities. Not perfect, I mentioned. Yes, a field of further investigations, of course. Yes, not cheap, also mentioned, so it's not a cheap, let's say a cheap product, but also a survey is not cheap, in fact. And last but not least, also mentioned here, fulfilling partly, only partly the tourism policy needs. So being realistic, not all the questions can be fulfilled by PSA, by tourism satellite account. And last, I want to say that PSA does not substitute primary statistics like surveys on accommodation, like surveys on overnight stays and arrivals and so on. Because I remember when we published the first time PSA, then one of the people were saying, well, then we can forget about overnight stay statistics because we have TSA. But TSA is living quite tremendously from this tourism basic data, of course, because you need some basic data to fill in the various tables. So substitution of primary service is not possible by TSA, of course, but just to mention. Okay, so I think I've finished this presentation, but still there's still room for questions.
From your presentation, you said it is based on annual basis. I just wonder whether you have kind of higher frequency and then the timeliness of the publishing, and more about whether you have to find the kind of main aggregate of the TSA on a higher frequency. Because for us, we are kind of quite used to kind of a very high frequency, and just it was still in a policy curve.
Timeliness is a matter concerning tourism satellite accounting, and I know from discussions the policy is not satisfied with this because it's due to the fact that national account data are not sometimes not available. Of course, there's the possibility to do some forecasting, and we, in the Austrian case, we are increasing the attractiveness of the results by doing some forecasting. but only for key figures. So not the total TSA, of course, but only for some key figures. And I think it's reliable and it's possible to do so. And this is increasing let's say, the attractiveness of TSA results. And it's quite necessary also for policy issues. But the main issue is always, from a policy point of view, to have more detailed data, also based on TSA. But you cannot do more detailed data if you don't have the basic data. If you don't have very detailed data on expenditure, you cannot have more detailed data or more detailed data on TSA level because the TSA is fed, let's say, by tourism-related data, and if they are not detailed, then also TSA is not detailed. So this is always the concern, and of course it would be good, as it is in your case, to have quarterly TSA estimates, which is possible, but in many countries they don't do it because simply of budget reasons. So it's if the value of TSA is not recognized, let's say from the policy, then it's very difficult to receive the necessary budget for doing more estimates. But I must say that this is also our task, let's say from the compiler's point of view, to communicate in a better way what TSA can do, what the advantages of TSA are, and so on. So there is also much work that have to be done from not only from the policy point of view, but also from the compiler's point of view, to say more about the advantage of using something.
Mr. Lamai, so one thing is first stop the Thailand, so you mean another tour to another countries?
I couldn't understand.
No, question, Mr. Simple. So this is the first stop to India, Thailand and the lectures. So you make another tours and lectures in other countries as well, Asian countries?
For the moment, it's nothing planned for the moment.
Thank you.
But I know there were some previous workshops also done by UNWTO. There was a huge workshop in the Asian area. I think it was in 2011-12 by a colleague. It was done by a colleague of mine. We had the same workshop also in the European area. There was in Americas. There was also a workshop. But still, there's going on. As I mentioned, in regards to the measuring sustainable tourism, there will some programs, capacity building programs, which are, for which many the responsibility is lying in the hands of UNWTO. But also concerning the story with TSA does not end. Also.
Any more questions, please? No? All right. Not more. Okay, that's clear. And thank you very much for your insightful presentation this afternoon. And then in showing of our appreciation, I would like to invite Kun Sangchan Gao Prathum Rasami, the directors of Economic Tourism and Sport Division, to deliver a token of appreciation from Thailand.
Maybe just I want to add. So
okay.
Thank you very much.
Sorry.
Also from your side that it was only one person sitting here, and sometimes it's boring because it's only one voice. Sometimes it's good to change. The people are changing, but I hope I could transfer some news, let's say, or some points of discussion. I hope it's also a start of discussion internally, maybe some of the issues which I mentioned. And I thank you very much for your attendance, being here, and for all your questions and discussion points. So it was very much a pleasure to be here and hear this presentation.
Yeah, we also I would like to say on behalf of everyone here, it is our privilege to have you here and share the experience and best practice from Austria. Thank you very much. Now please welcome. Yes, may I invite Kun Sangtan Garamatum-Rasmi, the Directors of Economic Tourism and Sport Division. She would like to present a token of appreciations. That's wonderful. Can you have a photos? Yes. Well, thank you very much once again to Mr. Peter Lyon. And thank you very much for all of you for being strong attention for the whole day today. And then we have the rest of the seminar tomorrow. And then it's very, very, very informative presentation once again for tomorrow. Thank you very much. สวัสดีค่ะ